Talk later. Actually sets the agenda for these meetings. Chair. They have to be approved by the town council? No. No. I think the town manager
Town manager
usually
does that,
sets
yeah.
them. The town manager, yeah. The job.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, Howard. Personnel. Can you tell if anyone's logged in?
All right, I'm gonna call us to order at 7:30 PM, and I'm going to apologize to all because I had the time wrong. We have Bev here and Gary and Nona and myself. The first item on the agenda is oral communications. I don't have any participants. Is there anybody on the committee who would like to say something in this part of the meeting?
Yeah, I do,
Great,
just a short report on the website.
great.
I've actually written two of them. And we'll meet with the town's webmaster on Monday and try to get an idea of what she can do for us. And so on. So we're making some headway there.
Wonderful. That's so good,
To
Gary.
what? To,
Two of our open spaces.
okay.
But the big unknown so far right now is the industry part. So I had planned to have all three done and that's by the next meeting. So I'll be sending those to you for you.
Wonderful.
The rest of the weigh in on. This is the descriptions of our open spaces for the website.
Okay.
That's great.
Because
Thank
it's
you.
way out of date. Looked at it recently. So,
At one time, and this is, are you?
Yes,
ready
go ahead.
for another-
Yes,
Craig at one time mentioned putting signs up for our open spaces. And that just never, I don't think it showed up on the agenda in here. But I'm thinking the one that really needs it is Springdown.
sure.
we'll have to look at the history of that, by the way.
Okay.
The committee that met sort of approved, came up with a plan
Yeah,
and the vision and all of that.
right.
Really didn't want anything out there. Okay. Well, unless you're thinking maybe you got these signs somewhere.
No, just as people enter, saying, look, this is your open space.
Yeah.
Come and enjoy it, That's That's all I would put there.
I think we have to probably agendize this.
We can
we-
agendize it, and we did have a conversation where, in which my memory is, we can check the minutes. People decided that this wasn't what we were going to deal with then. Is that your memory also, Nona? So it was more that it had gotten tabled until other things were addressed, but I'm more than happy to agendize it, and maybe we'll have both the website and revisiting the signage question on our next agenda. Happy to.
So what we said in the last minutes was that signage is still an issue that the committee would like to address and may entail a budget request. So it came up in the context of, should we try and identify a budget item for that? But we agreed then that it would be put off to another discussion.
But we can certainly we can revisit that if the committee would like to, for sure. Other thoughts before we move on to the minutes? Okay. Should we, am I waiting for a motion to approve the minutes? Is that how that works?
If I could just say one thing about the minutes first. I got a call from Betsy who suggested that the minutes could have been, they should have been phrased to say what the actual questions were that we discussed when we were talking about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund versus the Inclusionary Housing Fund. And my feeling at the time was that I didn't have quotes on what the questions were. So I just said, we discussed the question of in a more general term. And so, and I think that that's probably more consistent with the Brown Act requirement that the minutes be primarily action items. So if everyone is okay with that, and as long as meetings are recorded, I think I'd like to sort of not try and capture everything word for word except on action items.
I think you did the right thing with that. And I think there are other ways for us to get our questions into the public record if we're not able to get those questions answered. So I'm working on getting those questions answered. And so that can get read into these minutes as we get those questions answered as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's council, by the way, enforce that idea. You don't have to get his word address every time. So it's just action items. We do it. We've been really good in supplying some added information, which I find very helpful because my memory doesn't last 2 months.
Yeah, mine doesn't either.
Yeah.
I think Nona's done wonderfully, and there was a lot of conversation about minutes at the meeting of the Committee of Committees that I attended. And as you say, Gary, the Brown Act requires very skeletal minutes, in fact.
Yeah.
And so we're already doing more as well. And we can talk with Betsy next time we see her about if she wants to get those questions into the public record a different way. Other thoughts about approving the minutes? Does somebody want to make a motion to approve them?
Which one? We're doing May.
Should we do them separately? I bet we could do them together.
So I
Okay.
have to abstain.
Then let's, are there any comments or changes to the May 4th minutes? Okay, do I have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Do I have a
I
second?
move. I guess I'll second.
Yeah, because I'll
Yeah.
abstain. That was not here.
Awesome. Good.
Okay, great. Then all in favor? Okay. So for the next round of minutes for June 8th, does somebody want to make a motion?
What we-
Thanks.
what it is,
Okay, great. Are we voting? We're good. Okay. I will say about this that now that we have more staff, I've been told that I can get the minutes to the town staff and they'll go up on the website. So that we have that to look forward to. Okay, so first on our old business is these questions that we've just been talking about with regard to the minutes and the participants. The one question that I did get answered that had been raised by Betsy, you'll remember the housing report had just been published when we had this meeting, and so she had some questions. And her concern was that the Dorothy Ford Park and Open Space was going to be rezoned. And we have from the town attorney that the general plan has been changed to consider that parcel part of the gateway that they redesignated, but it is not slated to be rezoned. So it is not in the pool of properties that are being considered for rezoning, and it is now in the general plan designated as part of that gateway. That's the answer to that question.
What does that imply in terms of the density of housing that can be put there?
I don't think it helpfully implies anything about that. What it does signal is that it can be changed with the general plan, where once the zoning happens, it's a big legal process, right? And so the rezoning was going to be more of a final outcome than the inclusion in the gateway. That's what's relevant to us. I don't think I don't have an answer about what that means about density, but that's something that'll get sorted out as that gateway part of the general plan gets sorted out.
So it's not rezoned yet.
And it's not slated to be rezoned. I don't know what that's going to end up meaning. So that's the best I can do by way of an answer. The other big chunk of our question was about what was going on with the inclusionary housing and what the redesignation as a trust fund meant. That is not a question I've had answered yet, but there's going to be another meeting of the subcommittee that's talking with folks about the inclusionary housing. And so that meeting, I think, is going to happen next week. They're still scheduling it, but we will report back to you guys when we get that answer.
Who's on this committee?
Well, the subcommittee is Judith and Mary. That's the subcommittee of the town council that's working on the inclusionary housing fund, which has been renamed, as far as I know, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And there are two representatives from several committees also meeting with them. And so it was me and Betsy from our committee. I can get you the list of folks who are contributing from other committees. So there's a subcommittee of finance. There's a subcommittee of inclusion, also part of those conversations. And that's the subcommittee that we wrote our recommendation for the use of inclusionary funds for that we talked about at the last meeting. So having agendized that item, that's what I wanted to say to you guys. But this would be probably a good opportunity for you to let me know if there are other questions that the committee would like to get answered as I continue to try and understand what the impacts on open spaces are of these other irons in the fire.
The thing that I don't know is what happens now that the HCD has come back to the town and said, no, you need to push harder to make housing happen at Dorothy Ford Park. So you need to incentivize development. And what
have you heard of? Yeah, there's a few zingers that the state has added.
Yeah, I know.
Project.
So is that, I had invited Craig and I had hoped that he would be able to make it tonight. That is, shall I invite Craig as our liaison to come to our next meeting and explain and help us understand that? Does that make sense? Are there other things that we can do.
Shouldn't he just come? Does he need to be invited?
I don't have control over that. I think it would be great if he came.
He's always invited.
I didn't mean,
you
sorry,
know-
I was maybe Bev, I was speaking a little bit euphemistically. Of course, he's always invited. I was thinking about expressing our ardent desire that he attend.
Okay,
I saw him a week or so ago. I asked him how many subcommittees he was on. It was on 5.
Yeah, it's really hard.
They've all got it.
It's really hard. So I really appreciate
ours
that.
is really important.
But I really appreciate that question, Nona. I don't know what's going to happen either. And but do you have ideas about how we as a committee can get better informed about that?
I mean, maybe this is all too new for there to be an answer, but I guess what our committee wants to know is the sunrise provision still even an option, right? Is the town going to try and defend that to the HCD or not? Or what can we do to make it still a viable strategy?
Yeah, it's still on the books. In fact, I think there's a two-year period
Right.
still stands, even with the recent submittal by the state.
But don't we have to respond to the state now?
I don't know when they have to respond
Yeah.
vis-a-vis for
Yeah.
rezoning,
I guess that's all.
but they want things speeded up. is for
Yeah.
sure.
They want faster and easier for developers.
Mm.
Incentivized.
Okay, so I will see what I can do about getting more information about what these consequences are going to be. For sure.
I hope Greg can just tell them that come once every so often. We don't need to hear every time that we want to have some particular questions answered.
I will do. For sure.
That will be an action item.
That goes in the minutes.
He gets it.
Yeah. Okay. Our second old business item here is the open space brochure. So I'm happy to report that we did get into the budget the money to send it out.
Yay,
So
Tishan.
that's
Way to
great.
go.
I learned a lot. But I wanted to take the pulse of the committee about whether this is the exactly right moment to send the brochure out. It's been suggested to me that sending it out right now in the throes of this is something we should just notice. I honestly don't have a position either way. It was suggested to me that I raise this with the committee. So I wanted to see what people thought.
I'm not quite understanding why we should delay it.
It has been suggested that it's tone deaf at a moment at which we're about to develop open space to send out a brochure advertising
Good to know.
services. I have also,
You should see what I wrote up about Ford Park. description.
good. Well, and we should get that up as soon as we can. Okay, so if I'm getting the sense that the committee feels like we should send it out. None of you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree. Someone had suggested that because the Trails Committee is sort of on the brink of completing a new trails map for the town, that maybe there should be some kind of, I don't know, a joint mailing. I don't know if that would be more cost effective or not. They could go, it makes sense that they would go hand in hand. But I don't know when that's going to be ready.
It's no idea of the timing.
Yeah,
That could be like us.
it
Good
could take.
Lord.
a
Our
long time.
experience is that we've been close for a while.
What was the budget that was approved? for
It's,
it?
2,500 is what we asked for. Great. Okay. So I'm glad to have a sense that we'll go ahead and try and get that out.
Do we need a motion on that or not?
Nope, we've already decided to do it. We already asked for the money. I don't think it's something that needs a motion. I was asked to talk to the committee about it and I have, so that's great. Bev, I think you have a little bit of information about the mid-pen.
About Hawthorne?
Yes.
Yeah. This last week, this is sort of a side, but Green Foothills had a work day up there. And I signed up along with a dozen other people and we pulled Yellow Star at the thistles for an hour and a half
Wow,
up there. So it was, I got to see more of the Hawthorne than I had before.
so cool.
But I listened to their meeting that they had last week, which was the first meeting of the subcommittee from Mid-Penn for Hawthorns. And I learned a lot about the Brown Act that I didn't know. She was very concerned to make sure that they knew everything about it, especially because there's going to be an open space walk coming up. Let's see if I can find that. Oh, here it is. On Saturday, the 26th of August, there's going to be a site visit of this new committee, which, by the way, is the committee's 7 people that they chose from Mid-Penn from their units. And then they had an application out for 6 other people, and they found 6 really good people, so they're pleased with that. And there are a few other people on the committee that will not vote, like Sarah Wernerhoff is one of them. Anyway, so the date of the walkthrough is August 26th. Everybody's, their meetings are all open. Every,
This is public, the public,
yeah, but they're
event.
going to send out a notice but it's RSVP only because there's limited parking up there.
Yeah.
And as you know, so we need a reservation for that. But the other times, well, okay, and there'll be a second walkthrough on December 16th, second site visit for the committee. But she was especially concerned that there wasn't a lot of talk about what was going on between the different members of the committee at the walkthrough. But anyway, so what they're looking for is where's my they're looking for ways to put trails in, maybe connect it with other local trails. Regional is something they're not worried about right now. The other thing that disappointed me is the historic buildings are totally out of the picture for now. That's for another problem way down the line. I thought that might be a good place for the parking and stuff to start the trails. That's totally out of the picture. So I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you so much for keeping track of that for us. Bev.
Sure.
They talked about how much parking is going to be try to provide.
No,
or
you
where it
mean for the
was.
site visit or
No,
just
no,
a
no, just in
no?
general.
No. But they talked about now, are we going to frame this park as a destination park? We just meet up for a snack and then move on, or things like that. There's a lot of questions like that to be discussed. A lot of things to be discussed.
Is there a big picture timeline? Bev, do they have a timing goal?
Yes, they hope to be through before the end of the year.
Okay.
But it's like 7 months. They think it might have to be extended into January. and March of next year. So
That's a master plan.
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they hope. One of these next meetings, right?
Sorry, I was just checking to see if anyone was logging in.
Do they meet in person and where? Down at the office.
Okay,
Yeah.
at the Midtown office.
Midtown offices, right? But it's always online. That's why I didn't go to the meeting. I watched it
Okay, so it's
online.
hybrid.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I just watched it. I didn't watch it as Zoom. I watched it later.
You watched the recording. Okay. So this next item, which begins our new business, okay to move on, is this change that that you all know about that we haven't talked about yet as a committee, which is from the maintenance of the open spaces coming out of the general fund to this year in the budget, taking the maintenance of the open spaces for the town out of the utility tax money that is earmarked for open space. And this is something that the committee has resisted in the past. There's a long record. There are lots of conversations about this in past minutes. But we arrive at the question again, with it having been decided by the town council to use some of this utility tax money this year. It is, I am still getting to understand completely. So none of what I'm about to say should be treated as hard numbers, but the idea was that it would be capped at 10% of the money that was coming in. That was going to be around $40,000. It turns out that what we've actually been spending on maintaining the open spaces is a lot more than that. And that wasn't part of the conversation when the idea was to just cap it. I think they were trying to, I think getting used to the idea of using utility tax money from open space at all led to it being capped, but that has now created this complicated situation where we don't have as much money as we have spent in the past. That I found this out from conservation after the fact. And I didn't really know to ask that. I didn't think to ask that question. So what is beginning now is conversations with conservation about what open space needs in terms of maintenance. Conversations between, I believe, conservation and the town council about what that's going to be. And also now we are part of that conversation thinking about this committee's position on using X amount of money every year out of the utility tax funds to do the maintenance that has in the past been taken out of the general fund. So I believe the information I have is that the Conservation Committee has created a subcommittee to work with us on this question. And I think it makes sense for us to create a subcommittee to work with their subcommittee. And so just so that we are not doing things in parallel without knowing what the other committee is doing, and also so that we can work collaboratively. There's good reason not to want to have two committees thinking they're responsible for the same thing. And so being clear about what the Open Space Committee does and doesn't feel responsible for policy-wise, and being clear about what the Conservation Committee is going to do makes sense. So I think I'm describing two questions that are before us. One is the creation of a subcommittee of open space to work with conservation. The second question, and maybe the larger question, is it makes sense for our committee to come up with a coherent idea about what the relationship between that utility money is and maintenance, so that we aren't reacting to budgetary concerns, but have a clearly stated policy goal that makes sense, that is consistent with what conservation knows about the open spaces, what our practices have been, and what we want them to be in the future. So these are the two sort of things nestled in this agenda item. I know that Betsy wanted to be here, and I have the impression that she also would be interested in being on that subcommittee. I don't know if others are interested in that. Do we have to vote on whether we're making a subcommittee first?
Okay.
Do we have to vote on whether we're going to make a subcommittee? I don't know that.
The council told us to come up with a subcommittee. Have we been ordered to do so?
No, we have not.
We have not, yeah. My view is that we should. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, this is very much coming from many of us who just want to work together.
Yeah.
It hasn't been imposed from the outside. So it seems like a good idea. What do you think, Bev?
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know if I can nominate Betsy without her being here. What were you gonna add, Nani?
Well, and maybe we could have a little bit more discussion
Great.
first on just sort of what the issues are. And I guess from my perspective, there are good reasons not to have any of the UUT allocated for maintenance, but this is an extremely tight budget year. And I think we all have to recognize that if the perfect is the enemy of the good, we're going to be worse off than we are now. So I'm okay with using the money that way this year. I think what we should push for is that if that's going to happen in the future, that it gets revisited in the future, that we don't just assume that this happens automatically every year. And I don't know whether or not that the council has already sort of pledged to do that. Does anyone know if this is really?
Well, I think Craig made that kind of suggestion, didn't he? That it would be just like for 2 years or something like that.
Well, did Craig make it, or has the town council decided that? It's sort of the question I have.
Yeah.
And partly because, obviously it's within the letter of the law, the town to do that, according to all of the legal advice that they've gotten, but it's not consistent with what a lot of people understood. And so I think that if there is concern about what the spirit of the law was, or, what the position of the voters would be if they were asked again, I think it shouldn't be a standing commitment to use the UUTA allocation for maintenance. That's my position.
Well, our discussion from the last meeting, we started this a bit, and there was a little bit of interest. And I think Terry put it, there should be guardrails. And I think we sort of agreed on the 10%. But that's just, I think it's a starting point for 22 and 23, 24, because that's currently already in the budget
Right.
for this year. But I think the subcommittee can investigate every possibility and come back to our committee as well as conservation with some maybe different kinds of numbers or ways of getting the money, from which fund they will come from. I think isn't that would be the major things that the subcommittee should be for, to make it a little simpler for the rest of us on the committee. Come with some really good ideas. You can shoot them down if you don't like them. But your point about taking money out of the fund in the first place, which our current policy really doesn't allow policy. So we'll all have to be in on the vote to change it and to what to change it to. But I think we can get a good start with the subcommittee and see what the subcommittee can do. I might ask,
Okay.
are you on the conservation subcommittee?
I am on this conservation subcommittee,
Yeah.
and
And there's two. You've got
Judy
five-
Murphy.
You've got
is also-
five people, so two, yeah.
Yeah, so Judy Murphy is also on it. And Gary, I think it'd be great if you would be on the subcommittee from this committee. I think you have, you know the history, and
I think Betsy would be wonderful on it. I think she's also got several commitments already
It's true.
in terms of subcommittees, so I don't know. I don't, are we nominating people for the subcommittee? Or you needed two, right? I mean, they need two, Betsy and, yeah, somebody else. Okay, Betsy and Gary.
I wonder about, I mean, I do know from conversation that this is something that Betsy wants to do. But I don't know if it's okay to nominate her in her absence. Let's do this. Bev, do you have an interest in doing it if Betsy can't?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's nominate Betsy and Gary, and if Betsy cannot do it, I will. Can we, we'll designate me an alternate if it turns out that Betsy is already doing more than her share, which I think would be easy to see. I heard you, Gary, to describe a slightly different job for this subcommittee than I initially articulated. So our open space subcommittee will be finding out what exactly has already been agreed to, what the length of time that the town council already thinks that this is going to last, because I think it's just for the year, but I know that there were longer periods of time in that conversation. So the committee would figure out sort of where we stand, what the other possible sources of revenue are, and work with conservation about the budget. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay, maybe you did say it. I wanted to make sure I understood. Okay.
I think in
Interesting.
principle, it makes sense for that to be a standing subcommittee because basically every year we have this situation that conservation decides what the parcels need in terms of maintenance, and then the money has to come from somewhere. And so to the extent that there is a subcommittee, we can potentially avoid a conflict, the council sort of creating a conflict between the two committees.
So I'm hoping that the subcommittee will come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Simplifying the sort of thing.
Can we call it the maintenance subcommittee?
If there's any.
So glamorous. But I think that captures, right? It's the subcommittee of the open space committee that attends to the maintenance of the open spaces. No, when conservation created this subcommittee that you're on, did they vote on it?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't actually remember. I can look back.
Okay. So I think we should vote this committee into existence so that we do not have to do it next time if we needed to. Shall we do that? Okay.
So I nominate Betsy and Gary to be on the open space maintenance subcommittee if Betsy is willing, and if she is not, then I nominate Tishan to take her place. Okay?
You need a
Second.
second? Okay, great. All in favor? Okay, so we're unanimous on that. Let me revisit though, there is, in addition to the subcommittee, a policy question, which is where this committee is going to stand on the use of the utility money for maintenance, right? Because that is the thing that we haven't done in the past. And I think by creating this maintenance subcommittee, we're charging that committee with helping us come up with a policy that we will talk about at a future meeting. Is that right? Rather than us trying to hammer out a policy now, especially since we don't have Betsy and Terry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to agendize this policy on where this, does that not feel right to you, Gary?
Yeah. So there's one of the four of us who's going to get the group together. But,
Yeah, I'll do
we
that.
can Get that
Yeah.
done. And we'll try to do this, come up with something maybe by our next meeting. Maybe,
Well, we could
When
at
we
least,
get together, we'll see how things go.
we could at least have a report on how the conversation is going and an intermediate conversation if we don't have a policy. But it does feel like we as a committee need to arrive at a policy and a set of practices, right? So the committee will help us with both of those things.
Yeah, I've become a fan of the subcommittee. Looking at what the town council is doing. It's really a way to get things moving things faster.
We have lots of
Very good.
meetings. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Are there more thoughts on that? Go, go.
But the point is to stay within the overall way things are working now. So we don't have to go back to the voters for change in the open space.
Oh, no, we're not changing the 5-year. We're not affecting the utility users
Okay.
tax process at all.
We're using it differently than it has been used.
Okay.
But lots of people have told me that it is legally acceptable, this use, given the wording of the statute that puts the utility tax in place. Is that other people's
Yeah,
understanding?
I can remember the early votes when we vote over 5 years before the funds going. The word maintenance was used, at least in one of those votes. I tried to dig it up out of my files, but I couldn't.
You mean
find
in
it.
an open space vote?
Yeah. I'm talking about the vote to approve the UUT.
Oh,
That in our section for the open space, we use that term maintenance. At least once. But this goes back
a long
now
way.
a couple
a
of
long way.
decades. and more.
My understanding is that the language open space projects is readable as inclusive of maintenance, right? It's the projects word that makes it an
But we'll all
acceptable
get a
use.
say.
Right.
We'll all have that. so.
I think lots
So,
of us feel
to
that way.
discuss.
Lots of us feel that way. So, okay, great. Well, then I feel like this is a good starting place to have the subcommittee get us going on this work and for us to be doing it in consultation with conservation. So we actually know what we're talking about when we talk about maintenance. This last agenda item was actually going to be Betsy's domain. So without Betsy here tonight, I don't think that we are going to have an update. She has been keeping track of what's been going on in finance and also keeping her eye on housing, but that's all very fluid. And so we can hear about that. Does anybody sitting here with us want to report about other committees that you've gone to the meetings of that we should be aware of?
Is this supposed to say town committee meetings or town council meetings?
It's actually supposed to say committee meetings. It's supposed to say what it does. We've been keeping track of some other meetings and wanted to tell us what she had heard, and she'll be able to do that next time. So I think that we've been able to cover the things that mattered for this meeting. Although it doesn't say this on the agenda, we are on an every 2 months clock, and I'll assume that we're going to meet again in 2 months unless something else comes up that makes us feel like we need to meet sooner, which has been happening.
Are we going to settle, say, the first Thursday of every other month?
That is, I believe, what we decided. Yes. Yeah, no, I think that is what our practice is. We just had that extra one because we needed to weigh in on the inclusionary fund stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what threw us off. But yes, I think it's supposed to be the first Thursday of the month every 2 months.
Yeah, okay. So
But
in
it
that
doesn't
sense,
say
it's good
that.
I know I didn't have, obviously from other things that have gone on today, good control over this. I actually got the title of the committee changed, which has been hard to do. I also have been trying to get the bottom of the agenda changed, and I haven't successfully done that. The template I don't see what this looks like before it goes out, which is why I thought the meeting was at 7:30 and not at 7, because the way that this works, it would seem like, yeah, I saw this, but I didn't. I should have looked at it once it got posted, and I won't make that mistake again. But I thought I knew what was on it, and I thought that had been changed. So it is true that we meet every 2 months. That has been approved by the town council. That hasn't quite made it onto our agendas yet, but it is supposed to say that, and I'm working on that.
So what time do we want to meet at?
You
on an
tell me.
ongoing basis?
You guys tell me.
I like 7.
Better for you.
What
Okay,
about you?
fine. Yeah, that's fine. How about
Okay
you?
with you?
I will show up whenever you guys want to meet for
If
the
it's
rest of
any-
for the rest of our time together.
If it's any consolation, I have shown up for meetings scheduled at 7:30. I've done that before. so
Wow, that's a kindness,
done
Gary.
before.
I thank you. That is a kindness. It's certainly not something I hope to ever do again.
Thursday of the month
Every other.
Every
other
other
month.
month.
at
7.
7. Okay.
So that means we're talking about October, right?
Yeah.
Woo, the year goes fast. Unless something about this conversation pops up, but I think that
We could go either way. We cancel, we can add it.
so many
Add
things
special
could
meetings.
happen, Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. Shall we, would someone like to move to close the meeting?
Um,
Would you like to make that motion?
Sure. To adjourn the meeting?
Yes. Great.
7.
So
Okay,
what
great.
day of the week is 7/27? I'm not sure. Give it to me.
7:27.
Yeah, what day of the
Was
week
that for
was
the
it?
midterm thing?
Yeah, what day
Yeah.
of the week was that? Was that Wednesday or Thursday?
The 27th of August? No, July is what you're asking. That's a Thursday.
Okay, but they're meeting the second and fourth Thursdays.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was the 4th Thursday. So did they meet on the 13th and the 27th?
No, that was their first meeting.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
27th, but, so the first Thursday for us is fine.